Welcome to the Man Up God's Way podcast, a show that dives into the real, raw, and relevant issues for men and their faith, life, and community. Now, your host, Jody Burkeen.
Hey guys, Jody Burkeen here with the Man Up God's Way podcast. Want to welcome you guys. And if you get an opportunity, please share this podcast with all your friends, those at your church, maybe in your men's group, and even those at work. It's a conversation that we have throughout the week that will edify any man and give them the tools that they need to be the man that God has called them to be. And so if you take that opportunity, we'd love for you just to share it right now. Also coming up in the next couple of weeks, I'm really excited. We've got our new app coming out, and it's going to be it's the best thing that we've done in a long time. So really excited about that. It is a complete discipleship app, and it's going to help you grow in the grace and knowledge of Jesus Christ and help you teach other men as well. And so we're really pumped about that. So be listening and watching our social media for more on that. And so tonight, I'm really excited. I've got a great guest, Don Ross. Don, how you doing, brother?
I'm doing great, Jody. Glad to be here.
Well, glad you're here. And you are the founder of Manhood Tribes, correct?
That's right.
All right. Well, as we get into the conversation, we'll hear more about Manhood Tribes. But right now, one of the things I really love to hear is I love to hear your story, your testimony of kind of how God, took you from where you were to where you are today, and all the things in between. And so if you would just share with us your testimony.
Yeah. Thanks for asking. My story as a young man was not atypical from a lot of guys, I think, who grew up in the environment that I grew up in. So I'm originally from the South. I grew up in Mississippi. I live in North Carolina now. But so as a, in the deep part of the Bible Belt, I grew up in a Christian home and a church going home. And so was around things of the Christian faith, from a very early age. I was baptized young, and went through like the confirmation kind of stuff with my church. I would say that I actually became a follower of Christ of my own decision, probably about the time I was 12 or 13, entering into, kind of middle school age. And just remember, I was actually on a youth group trip to Disney World, believe it or not. And I heard my youth pastor just talking about the reality that all of us are sinners and in need of a savior. And I remember that hitting me with just the reality of that seems true of me. That's something that I want. And how do I go about pursuing that? And so I gave my life to Jesus at that point in time. But I would say, that was I wouldn't call it a surface level decision. I think it was genuine, but it took years probably for that kind of genuine decision to actually start kind of playing out in my life. So I would say when my faith really became real to me was actually later in college. Now, I had a lot of the elements of faith kind of in place. I was, regularly attending church. I was involved in a Bible study. And while I was in college, I was actually pretty active in a college ministry and kind of doing all the things, right? I had all the things on the surface that would indicate, yeah, this is a guy who takes his faith seriously. But I don't know that I actually understood at that point yet what it really meant to have a relationship with Jesus. I knew that, as far as I knew, having a relationship with Jesus was doing all the things that I was doing. It was, you go to church, you read your Bible, you pray, and that's what a relationship looked like. Even though I knew that there were no other relationships in my life that looked anything like that, right? If it was all that one-sided, you wouldn't really call it a relationship at all. But that's kind of how I understood it. And I was checking the boxes as best I knew how. But at the same time that I was kind of doing all of these, religious things on the outside, I had really kind of a dark side of life beginning to build with me as well. And that was that while I was in college, I got exposed to and then eventually kind of addicted to pornography. And so that was kind of in the early era of high speed internet, and also kind of the early stages of internet pornography. It was something even at that point in time that was existent, but not really something that people were talking about yet. It was still a very taboo subject at that point in time. And so, we kind of openly talk about pornography, especially among men in the church world today, but it was definitely not the case at that point in time. And so for me, it was something very shameful, something very secretive, and definitely something that I felt like I could not talk to anyone about at all. But after years of really kind of wrestling with that and trying everything to be able to kind of break free of it on my own, I just was really at the end of my rope and at a place where I didn't want to be continuing that in that behavior, but I didn't see a way to be able to stop. I didn't know what to do. And I remember being on the floor of my bedroom in my fraternity house, in my dorm room in my fraternity house, and just crying out to the Lord and saying, "Hey, I don't know if there's any way that you can get me free of this, that you can get me out, but if you can, I will do whatever you ask me." And I remember that this was the first time that I actually heard the Lord say something back to me, and He said, "I want you to confess it." And of course, that was the one thing that I didn't want to do. Sure enough, that was the thing that He named. I didn't want to have to talk to somebody else about it. And, but that was exactly what He was asking me to do. And I would say, I said, okay, I said, okay, I meant when I said I'd do whatever you asked. And so long story short was that I found a friend to be able to be honest with with them about my struggle, and just to open up to another guy. And that created for me a pathway of relationship, friendship, and transformation. I found freedom through Christ and through that kind of friendship where there was honesty and vulnerability, and that changed my life. I mean, I would say, I definitely was a believer. I was a Christian before then, but that was really when I actually experienced what transformation and freedom and healing in the context of a relationship with Jesus can really look like, and that changed the course of my life. I was at that point in time planning on becoming a doctor. And that was really kind of the thing that pushed me into a place of saying, I think God may have a different plan for me, and actually ended up pursuing ministry from there. So it's a great story from there on out in terms of like what it's looked like to continue to follow the Lord. But that's kind of where it all began.
Wow. That's great. I love those God moments, when you can kind of look back and put a stake in the sand, so to speak, and just kind of, exactly where that turning point was in your life that, redirected everything. And so I like to hear those kind of stories. So after college, you obviously, disappointed your parents by not being a doctor.
Yep. That was an even bigger shift for them than it was for me, I think.
That's hilarious. So what made you, not pursue being a doctor? Like, what was it that you felt that God was leading you to go to like did you go to seminary, or did you just end up going to ministry? Like what?
Yeah. So I had been involved, as I mentioned, I had been involved in a college ministry while I was in school, and was actually at a kind of a retreat, like conference thing over Christmas in my senior year of college. And I heard one of the speakers kind of talking about, making big decisions for your life, and whether that's career or who you're going to marry, or, just any of those kinds of big decisions that, that we're all kind of facing at that stage in our life. And he said these words that just it just hit me like a thunderbolt. It was like, he said, God will never call you to do something that you're capable of doing on your own. And, he unpacked a little bit more of what that meant. But for me, I knew that what that meant to me was that this story that I had written for myself about medicine was a good story. And I had ways that I was intending to be able to use that career path for the glory of God, and to make something really good out of that. But at the end of the day, it was really about me. It was about my intelligence, about my giftedness, about the things that I could do and what I could pursue on my own. I could be great, as the world defines great, in that arena without, really like anything to do with God at all. It was really kind of just shine the spotlight on me and here I go. And I knew that was the case, and that what that meant for me was that I needed to hand that decision back over to God and just say, okay, I'm going to give this one to you. And if you give it back to me, great. If you don't, I'm willing to accept, whatever path you want to take me on. And I did. I surrendered that, and it was probably within a couple days that I knew, like, he's not giving it back. Medicine is not the right path.
Right.
But what it awakened me to was that really, like, God had been stirring in me a real desire for ministry all throughout my college career, and just seeing, wanting to help bring that same kind of transformational experience to others that I had experienced, and to be able to kind of offer that, especially to men. I was finding out more and more that lots of guys were struggling with some of the things that I had struggled with as well. And I wanted to be of help. And so it was at that point I decided I was actually going to go into ministry with the college ministry that I'd been a part of. And so I joined up with them for several years and did that for a while. Then went on to seminary and was a pastor for a long time. So yeah, I was in vocational ministry kind of all over for about 20 years.
Okay. Awesome. All right. So going back 20, so how long has Manhood Tribes been around?
Yeah, so Manhood Tribes has been a thing in some form for about 4 years now. So I actually decided to leave vocational, or I guess church ministry, full time about 4 years ago. And there was a lot to that decision. But the essence of it was that wherever I had been ministry wise, I had really gravitated towards working with men, whether that was my actual job or not. That was what I was really enjoying doing. I was seeing that churches and ministries were having a hard time reaching and connecting men. But at the same time, like, guys were sort of floundering, guys needed help, and a lot of them wanted help in their relationship with God, but weren't getting what they needed, weren't really sure where to go or where to turn for answers. And I just kind of felt like, gosh, I think I can help here. And so I was trying all kinds of different things, and I finally kind of stumbled on some things that were working. And just sort of felt like God was pushing me in the direction of saying, yeah, this is really what I've built you for, is to go be a leader of men. And I thought for a long time that meant that I was to use my position as a pastor in that kind of arena. And God made it pretty clear over the course of kind of several big things that happened in my life that that wasn't the direction that he wanted me to keep going with that story. Right. And so I had to, again, just kind of surrender that and say, all right, God, I'm going to do whatever it is that you want me to do to be able to pursue whatever it is that you've given me to pursue. And what that began to take the shape of was building something more like what you and I do now, which is, right, some kind of a digital platform for reaching and communicating with men, but also to use that in a way that helped men build the kind of community that they need and that they've been looking for in their own local area. So not doing, not just kind of creating a hey, come follow me online, sort of ministry. Not that there's anything necessarily wrong with that. I kind of knew that wasn't what God was asking me to do, but more to kind of equip and empower men to be able to lead other guys around them in their own local areas. And so that's what I started out trying to do. I left church ministry and actually jumped into a new career in digital marketing, because I knew that this Manhood Tribes thing wasn't going to pay the bills overnight, and I needed something to pay the bills. So I jumped into digital marketing, feeling like that could also help me learn some skills that would kind of grow and develop what I was going to do with Manhood Tribes. So that's what I've been doing for the past several years now. I work full time doing digital marketing and help reach men, quote unquote, on the side. It's starting to feel like it's as much of a full time job that just isn't paid yet. So yeah.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. So to go back to your, 20 years ago, for an example, that was kind of when you had started connecting with men and in the college ministry and stuff like that. And so then you move into seminary, and then you go into becoming a pastor. Like what was the process there? Did you like, you kept saying that you really felt called to men, but did you feel like you were just so inundated with all the pastoral stuff that you couldn't do that? Or did you kind of intertwine some of that every now and then, or what frustrated you the most?
I heard a great, I was actually listening to another podcast not too long ago. This was maybe just a week ago. And I heard another guy who'd been in ministry kind of describe it this way. And he said, 90% of church work is two things. It is getting ready for and pulling off Sunday services. And then the other thing is just dealing with crises that come up, whether it's, weddings and funerals, or, whatever the crises of your current congregation are, or, budgeting or staffing issues at the church, or, just you're dealing with a crisis all the time. And so between those two things, that's more work than most people can handle. And then somewhere the remaining 10% is where you actually get to do the ministry that you really enjoy doing. So it's that is, I think, a pretty apt description of what working for a church can feel like. And that was true for me too, was that, I really did sense that my passion was in the area of working with men. It just wasn't something I was getting to do a lot of. And it was also, this may have just been true of the particular environments that I was in, but I do kind of see this in lots of places. Men's ministry tends to be a kind of a back burner ministry for most churches. It's a thing that's kind of an afterthought. And that's, I don't know that that's necessarily really, I don't say that as a way to chide pastors or to tell churches they're doing it wrong. It's just that, churches have a lot of things to be responsible for. Right. And men's ministry doesn't usually make it to the top of the priority list. And there's good reasons for that. But so because of that, when I would approach church leaders about, hey, I want to invest more into doing men's ministry, and I think I've got some ideas of how we could do it better, it was always kind of met with, that's not really what we need to be spending our time on kind of thing. And so I think that was part of the process that the Lord really used in me of saying, yeah, this is what I want you to do, but it's not going to be in the context that you maybe expected it to happen. So that's kind of how I ended up going that route.
I'm the senior pastor at our church, and we founded it 10 years ago, going into our 11th year this year. And my number one ministry is to the ministry of the men.
That's awesome.
So
you're a rare breed, but I applaud you for it.
I wasn't bragging, but I just and this is what I try to train pastors all the time, is that you don't understand the power that you will have as a church. If you came to my church, over 50% of my attendees are men.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And which is typically right around 20-25% for most churches. And so we've brought in this training, that's my first ministry as the pastor outside of the pulpit, which, I mean, honestly, if you're preaching, if you've been called to preach, that's a talent that God has given you. Honestly, that's the easiest thing that I do all week long.
Yeah.
Preparing for my sermon, getting up and speaking on a Sunday morning is easy to me. And I get other pastors may not be that easy. But now because of that, I'm able to now focus. And I tell the women and I tell the church, if you will just give me your men, I promise you that not only will your families be, your marriages will be better, your families will be better, and this church will be stronger because of what we're doing in and through the men. And so we have that major focus with the discipleship of our men. And again, it's not every man, we take the ones who will listen, the ones who want to grow, and man, we pour into them and encourage them and chastise them sometimes, to be the men that they're called to be. But I totally get, I've been speaking now since 2012, all across the world. And, when I go to churches and do a men's conference or a men's retreat, it's usually the pastor is dealing with, little Edna, that's 95 years old, that doesn't like the doilies on the back table. And
that's right.
He's over there dealing with this and dealing with that. And instead of really focusing on his men. And, that's why he's struggling. I'll just be honest. That's why he's struggling. And so we have, we have this desire for pastors to focus on the men that are in their church instead of, because here's what happens. What we've seen here is that when we raise the men up, when we give them the structure, we give them, teach them the disciplines of, reading your Bible, praying, having a repentant lifestyle, loving God, loving your wife, loving your children in that order, and you get your household in order, then things starts falling into place, not only in their own homes, but also in the church, because now their whole family is coming to church. They're engaged, and they basically become the deacons of the church, the whole family, not just the men. without the title. And that's the cool thing about it. So
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's great, man.
I totally get what you went through. And I can imagine, like, I'm blessed. I always talk to pastor buddies of mine. I'm just like, man, I got the easiest church in the world. But I
That's
also
great.
think it's the culture that we built too.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's cool. So you were pastoring. You said there was, a whole lot of things there that kind of just got you out of there. And then you decided to go ahead and let me ask you this. Are you married?
I am. Yep. Coming up on 22 years. I've got 2 teenage sons, and yeah.
Okay. Awesome. All right. Good. And that's, I always tell men your first ministry is your family. You've got the way that I'm able to do our church, the way that I'm able to do Man Up is because it's the overflow of my first ministry, which is my family. And, if I can't prove my ministry through my family, then I don't need to have a ministry. And that's awesome that you got 2 sons to pour into and, bring them up in the lineage as well, and maybe a legacy as well. So that's
doing
awesome.
my best, man. It's never easy work, right? But doing my best.
It's not, especially with teenagers, man. I think there ought to be a law from 12 years old to 18. They need to go to military school. So a Christian military school.
That would definitely alleviate some problems around the house.
Would. I know. Keep me out of jail. It's weird because I've got I've got 2 boys and 2 girls, and they're boy, girl. And my daughter is 25. My son he's 23. And then I've got twin boy, girl, 15-year-olds. And so, they're all 10 years apart. But, I always tell my boys, I said, y'all are lucky I'm not in jail. If it weren't for the Holy Spirit, if God hadn't grabbed a hold of me before we had you guys, y'all would be dead. So
yeah,
it's only by the grace of God. So you left full-time vocational ministry, and obviously you went into the digital realm. How's that been going from, most of your life being in ministry to now the secular digital world?
Yeah.
What was that like?
So, the digital marketing career, I've kind of, seen it as an opportunity to be able to learn the skills that I need to be able to do the ministry I think God is equipping me to do. So it's in some ways very similar to, kind of the way Paul describes tent making in the New Testament. It's kind of the means to earn a paycheck and to be able to do what God has called him to do. I do enjoy it. So, it's not just it's not a begrudging paycheck, but it has taught me a lot, and it has allowed me both to support my family and to kind of pursue this passion and this new ministry opportunity. So, while I left church ministry behind, I still in some sense feel like I'm in ministry. It's just a very different type and style of ministry than what I've done before. And frankly, is kind of, is new to humanity. Like digital ministry was not a thing 10 or 15 years ago, so it's kind of brand new. We're still figuring it out. Some of it we're not doing all that well, but it's kind of fun and exciting to get to be a part of. So, yeah.
That's awesome. That is good. So are you, with the digital part of it, are you is with whatever company, and you don't have to say the name of the company, but whatever company you're with, is that giving you the ability to learn more for the Manhood Tribe? Is it helping you launch that a little bit easier?
It has, yeah. So I've been doing that for about 4 years now. Worked for a couple different marketing agencies, and have learned everything from building websites to SEO to paid ads to email marketing to social media. I mean, name it. I've dipped my toes in it, and so all of it has been super helpful for thinking about how to be able to create some of this stuff for Manhood Tribes, and that's been great. So it has, in a sense, given me a leg up. It's helped expose me to, just the industry and the skill set that I do need and use on a regular basis for stuff with Manhood Tribes. But there's been a lot to learn on my own as well. I've podcasting and creating YouTube videos and all that kind of stuff. Those are kinds of things that I've had to figure out for myself. But a lot of that has been really fun and energizing for me. I've kind of enjoyed that along the way. But But yeah, all of it I think has enabled me to, like I said, do a different type of ministry than I've ever done before.
Right.
It just requires a different set of skills. It's not quite the same as like learning Greek or Hebrew, but at times it feels like a different language. It's
It
like
is, yeah,
learning to
totally.
speak and interact in a way that is a little foreign. But I'm figuring it out, as we go.
And the second you figure it out, it changes.
Oh,
So-
that is absolutely the truth. So yeah, it's something new every day, and especially with AI now, like it's literally changing every day. So
yeah.
We do our best to keep up where we can.
I launched a company in 2005, and it was a internet-based company, but it was we did industrial equipment. We sold industrial equipment, but 2005, the websites were, $50,000 to have one built, and you had to have somebody do it and all that. Well, I hired this kid out of college. He had just gotten out of college. I gave him like 2.5% of my company. The company was worth zero at the time.
Yeah.
And I told him, you help me build it up, and I'll give you 2.5% of our overall revenue, and blah blah blah, all that kind of stuff. And then back then, everything was based on backlinks, and so the more backlinks that you had, the better your rating would be on Google. And from 2005 to 2013, I think it was, when they had what they called the Penguin update. We were number one on, like 25 or 30 keywords in our industry.
There you go.
And
you were out ahead of the curve there, man. That's awesome.
Long ways out there. And I didn't do anything, I just told him what I wanted as far as the website look, and he did everything else. But and then in 2013, it went from backlinks to social media. That was kind of the way that they were doing it, and it just keeps changing. Not all the time now.
All the time.
It was like Java back then, and now it's WordPress, and no telling what it's going to be like. In the future, like I can do my website now with AI. So I just tell my AI what I want, and then I go put it in my little WordPress site and take care of it. So
there
it's
you
crazy.
go. Yeah.
So
it is crazy. It's
started
wild how much it's changing.
Yeah, big time. Well, we started our social media run with Man Up in 2013. And, back then they weren't as stringent on, getting followers, and, your posts going viral were a lot easier back then. And we got hooked up with Duck Dynasty in 2016. And we were sharing their stuff. They were sharing our stuff. And like one thing went back and forth. And that was during the Hillary, was running for president at the time. And, gay marriage was a big thing back then. And, we got on a couple of veins of, some very viral stuff on ours, and it just blew our page up. And I think by the end of the year, we started in 2013, and by the end of 2016, we had over 300,000 followers.
Gosh.
On Facebook. And then it just exponentially has gone up since then. We've got 850 now. And, they've got to, you can tell that they're wanting money now.
For sure. Yeah.
We grow like one or two a day.
The model's changing. Yeah. The model's changing significantly, but yeah, totally. You're right.
But it does. That was my point, is it just changes so quickly that, unless that's your full-time job, you're going to miss the boat most of the time. You have to play catch up. So
even those of us who are doing it full-time are missing the boat. The boat's moving faster than we can keep up with. But
yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah,
well,
we do our best.
On top of that, especially if you're doing any type of digital marketing on social media, which that's really all there is anymore. I mean, you've got, some of the major ones, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, Threads, all of that. And just trying to keep up with all those is miserable.
Yeah.
So
yeah, no fun at all.
No, it's not. So you move into, 4 years ago. What was the idea? How do you feel that God gave you the idea for Manhood Tribes?
Yeah, so I really kind of evolved out of my own experimentation. So what I had been kind of working on within church ministry context was just looking at the fact that men's groups in particular at most churches were really bad. Right. It was just a pretty abysmal experience for most guys. Churches, you would look at just about any church, and if they had any kind of men's ministry activity going on, they had far more women's groups than they had men's groups. They had way more women involved in groups than they had men involved in groups. And even the guys who were going to groups would tell you that they weren't super, excited about their men's group experience. It wasn't necessarily doing very much for them. I'm kind of painting with a broad brush. There's obviously exceptions to those rules, but in general, that's kind of been the trend of men's groups at churches. And I was a groups pastor for a long time, and really loved just building community. I think it's a part of my own story that I talked about with pornography. I had just seen the power of male friendship and that kind of like honesty and vulnerability within that context, and just really felt like I think this is something that all men need. And as a church and as the Christian community, we've got to figure out a better way of helping men be able to connect. And so I started really just kind of, sort of taking on the sacred cow of men's small groups and saying, can we do this better? Is like, I think I could build a better widget. Can I take a shot at it?
Right.
And so I did. I came up with this model that I now is what I call a tribe, and really tried to build it around what I would call the felt needs of men. So what I began to see over time is that most church small groups, whether they be for women, for men, for mixed gender, for couples, whatever, they are built around the felt needs of women. They're built around the ways that women connect and interact. And so by that, I mean, like at the centerpiece of most church groups, you have a lot of social interaction. You have a lot of learning and reading and studying. And you have a lot of emphasis on emotion and emotional experience. Now, none of those things in and of themselves are bad. And I'm not saying that men shouldn't have those things as a part of their lives. But they tend to be the surface motivators for women. They tend to be the things that women want to go after and will pursue as a part of their life. And if they can get that within a church group context, then all the better for them. Men aren't pursuing those things. Those aren't our felt needs, right? Those are not the things that we're looking for. But yet most churches tend to build their men's groups with that same kind of model in mind. We're going to get together for social interaction. We're going to get together to study and to learn. We may not talk a lot about emotion, but the goal is really kind of around emotional experience. And I just, started to say like, that's not the way that men are wired. That's not the way that God has built us. That's not what we look for when we're trying to figure out, how to connect with other guys. So what would it look like to build a men's group around some of those things? What are those things even? What are men looking for? And how do we build it around that? And so my tribe model really is kind of built around those things. It's built around, men don't tend to get together for the sake of social interaction. They tend to get together for the sake of activity. Right? Men, when they get together, it's because they're trying to do something. They want to do something together. And if they're doing something, that's a reason to get together. And then they can enjoy social interaction just like women can. They just that's not the reason to get together. Right. And so, I tried to say, okay, how can we build some action and some activity into what a men's group looks like? Men also really love to be challenged. They like to learn and grow, but they don't typically do it from reading and studying the way that women might. They do it by being challenged and seeing those challenges turn into results in their lives. That's how men mostly tend to learn. This is also a problem in our education system today that, boys tend to learn the same way. And there's not much of that kind of learning style in our education system. It's one of the reasons I think that boys are having such a hard time in our education system today. But, these are the kinds of things that I started to say, I think we can build this into the way that we do a men's group. And so my tribe model is kind of built on those things. I say that the three pillars of tribe are manhood, camaraderie, and freedom. And that if you can accomplish those things, you can create a men's group that men can't live without. I mean, they are just going to be drawn like moths to a flame to that kind of environment because it's ticking the boxes for us. It does the things that we really are hungry for, and it helps us to connect in the ways that we are wired to connect. So that's really where I tried to start, and have just kind of grown it from there, figuring out how to be able to do that well. And like I said, my tribe has been going now for 7 years. I've helped some other guys start theirs. And now that's kind of what I do with Manhood Tribes is I have a program called Build Your Own Tribe, where I coach you as a man who is starting his own tribe in his area. So I'm not saying, hey, come join my tribe. I'm saying, hey, let me help you start your own, because men really need to be around other men locally, be around each other physically, be in the same physical space and presence as each other to get the most out of the community that we can. So I want to help guys be able to build that kind of, life-changing brotherhood that they've always been craving, and just to do it in their own space.
Right. That's good. That's really good. I like the idea. We have a thing called war groups, and, we help develop, within the church, it's basically a white labeled, Man Up God's Way group wherever you are. So it would say Man Up God's Way, Raleigh, whatever. And so it's kind of the same thing, but I tend to lean more on the discipleship theology side, and I think sometimes I burn, talking, because even the way that I do our conferences, I don't have playtime in the conferences. And one of the reasons being is that, guys will, for me, and again, what you're saying is resonating with me, because I think I lean more toward the other side of, I feel like guys will always get together to play, but if I can get them together to come to a conference, a 2 or 3 day conference or retreat, man, we're going to open up the fire hydrant and take a drink. It's like balls to the wall. Let's, sun up to sundown, man. We got our Bibles open. We're on our face. We're praying, and just obviously giving them application to go along with that. But I like the idea. What you're saying is, that you're getting these guys, because, it's funny that what you said is that guys sometimes will talk more if they're, throwing an axe or playing cornhole or sitting around a fire instead of around a table or something. You'll get guys to talk a lot more than just, all right, guys, let's open up a Bible and let's start talking. So,
right. Or even if that's, if the activity itself isn't the thing that generates conversation, and sometimes it isn't.
Right.
And we don't necessarily always design it that way within a tribe. What it does do is it gives you reasons to be together as men, and you start building shared experience. And when men have shared experience with each other, they start to build that, most important of manly virtues, which is trust. When we begin to trust one another, that's when those conversations start to open up. When you've got a guy that you've got some shared experience with, you've spent some time with, even if it's just doing goofy things, you've at least cracked a doorway for there's room now to have some of those heavy duty conversations. I've at least got a guy that I think I probably can turn to when life gets hard, or the circumstances kind of hit the fan, and I need somewhere to turn. You've got some guys, and most guys at the moment don't have any guys, right? They don't have the men in their lives to be able to turn to. And so that's why we just try to say, hey, if nothing else, we can use action and activity to help men build trust with one another. And then we can absolutely capitalize on trust, right? If you've got trust, we can take that and turn that into discipleship in any way, shape, or form you want to. But building that trust is what's, I think, really missing most in men's groups today, is that they get thrown together and immediately just start, chatting and trying to learn. And those things aren't bad, but when you haven't built trust with each other, there's not going to be the depth that men need to go along with it for that to actually, kind of translate into the transformation that I think we're looking for.
So is your model more set up for, friends, like a friend group, or is it for churches?
Yeah, I do it. So that's a great question, and it's not a simple yes or no answer. So
okay.
I would say that any guy that leads a tribe needs to be a believer, and I encourage him to do that within the context of his local church. And then I would say, like, in terms of who you would invite into your tribe, it probably helps. The tribe model is definitely built on Christ. And so the content, the way that we pursue transformation is all centered on Jesus. But if you've got a guy in your life who's not a Christian and who's hungry for, just wants to get out of isolation and connect with other guys, yeah, a tribe can absolutely be a great space for him, as long as he kind of understands what he's getting into and knows that it's a faith-based group, and he's okay with that. And the guys are okay with, hey, he hasn't bought into quite what we believe yet, but he's welcome in our space. I think that can be a really good thing and an incredible way to lead a man to Jesus, honestly, because he begins to build trust and community with other guys who are walking with Jesus. And it's hard to keep a man away from Jesus when his closest friends are walking with Jesus. So, I just think that it's a great way to be able to bring men into the kingdom if you can do it that way.
Have you ever seen the Alpha program? Have you ever heard anything about that?
I haven't been through it, but I'm very familiar with it.
It's kind of the same way. It's more of
there's some similarities there.
Yeah, it's more of the conversation that, comes from it. And, I went to England last summer, and I actually got to go to the Holy Trinity Church when it started and got to,
awesome.
got to see, and then I went to a conference late fall last year. And in the conference, the guy, and this is what I feel that the problem with churches are today. And, even some of the men's groups and women's groups that we have, is that the guy at the conference, he said, you have to let heresy have a seat at the table. And, I would, as a pastor, I was like, whoa, time out. I was going to stand up.
What now? Yeah.
I was going to stand up and rebuke him or something, I was like, and then he's like, listen to me. And I was like, all right, I'm not going to get, and there's 2,000 people at this conference. And the point that he made was that you have to give people a safe place to either ask the questions or even to share their honest understanding of who God is, Jesus is, the Bible is, even if it sounds like heresy. Allow them that opportunity to share that, because now then you're going to get the conversation started. And so that's where I would see, the Manhood Tribes being really successful in getting those kind of conversations started, and kind of allowing, the accountability and the trust and all of that kind of stuff to kind of organically grow within the group itself.
Yeah. And I would agree with you. And I would say, we see a lot of that happen. So, the program that I use, this Build Your Own Tribe program, a guy learns how to kind of start his tribe with basically a kind of a 12-week intro, where it's sort of like, hey, come check this thing out and give it 12 weeks and see what you think. And if you don't like it at the end of 12 weeks, you don't have to keep going. If you love it, which is, the normal experience, then we'll go as long as you want to go. We'll just keep going. But men get around it and they go, I've never experienced anything like this in my life. This is totally different, Christian or otherwise. But it's kind of what I think I've always wanted in terms of, having a group of friends that I not only do stuff with, but that know me really well and are challenging me and pushing me to be the kind of man that I actually do want to be, to follow God, for my faith to be as important as I know it should be and want it to be, but I've just never figured out how to do that. And guys go, more often than not, by the end of that 12 weeks, guys are going, how did I ever live without this? How did I make it without having something like this in my life? And that's kind of the goal, I think, is for us to be able to say, yeah, like God has designed us for tribes. He's designed us as men to live in that kind of small, tight-knit community. That's how he's built us to function. And so, I kind of feel like part of what we're doing is just sort of trying to restore kind of a natural order there that I think our culture has just lost touch with over time. And we're trying to kind of put some relational networking back in place that I think God has really intended us for.
That's great. So where, how does your wife see this? Is this a weekly event?
Yeah. So for me, from my tribe, we meet weekly. We actually just met last night and had a great meeting. We did what we call a manhood challenge night. So that's where we take a lot of what we talk about within Manhood Tribes is what I call the 5 marks of manhood. Those are kind of the things that help us understand what it means to be a man. And so 1 week out of the month, it's not our main focus, but 1 week out of the month, we get some just kind of fun time to spend working on what we call manhood challenges, where we're kind of testing each other and creating challenges for each other based around one of those 5 marks. And so it's just a way for a man to say, here's a place where I think I need to get better. And would you guys push me in this area, help me come up with some ways to improve? And so, yeah, so we spend some time kind of creating those challenges, and then we have a month to complete them before we have to come back the next time and talk about what we succeeded or didn't at. And it's really fun. It's again, kind of that like action and activity. It's just a great way for guys to have some ways to blow off steam. But my wife, yeah, she's super supportive. I mean, she sees this obviously as a passion of mine. She sees it, how it's made a difference in my life, but also how God uses it to and uses me to make a difference in other men's lives. And so, she tends to be more of the kind of like, hey, go do your thing. It's like
Exactly.
she understands this is a guy's thing, and she's okay with it being a guy's thing. And so she lets me have all the fun that I want to with that, but she's incredibly supportive of it.
That's awesome. Because I was thinking like, maybe your wife wants something like that, like a womanhood tribe or, something like that.
We've talked about that. And the more that we talk about it, I think we keep bumping up against the challenge of men and women are just different. I don't know exactly what the equivalent of a tribe would be for women, but, I don't want to, I think that's, it kind of like I was saying earlier, I think that's a lot of the mistake that churches made was they took a successful small group model that works for women and tried to apply it to men, and it just didn't work. And I don't know that the tribe model would work the same way with women because it's not built around the ways that women connect. So I do think there probably is a need for that same kind of small, tight-knit community for women. But how it works, I can't claim to understand.
Yeah. When you figure it out, dude, you'll be a gazillionaire.
Right.
It's funny. My wife and I have, tried to think of, ways that we could do like a women's up or, something like that. And, because she does our women's ministry at our church and does a great job with it. But, there's so much out there for women's ministry compared to what there is out there for guys. It's almost your unless God just reveals something to you new as far as the women's ministry go, you're almost just, stacking on the stuff that's already out there. So,
Yeah. There's a lot.
So, one of the things that I've, in all my years of ministry, what I've figured out is, I truly like what you're talking about is, just getting guys to talk, just getting guys in community, just getting guys to gather on a consistent basis. And then, sprinkling in, the study or we'll talk about that here in just a second. I'm not sure exactly what you do, but, just sprinkling in, that the Jesus and, the Bible and all that kind of stuff. And then what I found is that that's always good. And then what you can do is, and what we've done is, we take those that want to get serious, those that want to go deep dive into, systematic theology or into, maybe a calling or something that's going on in their life. And, obviously that number dwindles down, the deeper that you go, but it's always a good pool of, guys to work with, especially, for a church setting, especially too, that way we can kind of, like we have, Saturday morning men's breakfast, and man, they're packed, and then we have Wednesday night discipleship, and there's a lot less, and then there's, leadership training, there's a lot less, so that's kind of the way that we've done, the guys that are serious, man, we'll take and we'll spend extra time with them that want to do that. And not that we forget the other guy, we're still doing stuff, but it's you definitely see the numbers start decreasing as you get, into that seriousness there.
Yeah. I think that can happen. I think one of the reasons that tends to happen with churches is, I saw this for myself as a pastor, is that as a pastor, because I was oriented towards wanting to connect and, had a background that led me towards studying and learning, and I actually enjoyed those things. I tended to be a little bit blind to the reality that most men were not like me.
Right. Exactly.
And,
Yeah.
weren't oriented
Yeah.
towards the things that I was oriented towards.
Right.
And so, we would, I'm thinking of one church that I was involved in particular. We pulled off a really successful men's retreat every year, hundreds of guys involved. One of the just kind of like highlight moments for most guys in our church each year was this men's retreat.
Right.
But we would struggle every year to connect guys from that men's retreat into literally anything else, whether that was a small group or a serving team or you name it. Like trying to get guys to take a next step from that retreat to something else was like pulling teeth. And I think it was really for the most part because the things that we were trying to connect them to didn't look, feel, or act anything like that men's retreat. The guys were interested in that retreat. And then they could very clearly tell that what we were telling them was a next step was not a next step for them. It was not related at all to what they had just been a part of and what they had enjoyed about it. And we were trying to say, yeah, but this is the right thing for you to do next. And they were saying, okay, but not really.
Right.
I had a mentor that used to say men vote with their feet, which I just thought was brilliant. It's his way of saying like, guys will tell you what they find valuable because they will show up to it, right? They will literally get themselves to it if they think it's going to improve their lives in some way and they'll get some value out of it. If not, they just won't show up. And that's what they were doing. And they were not showing up to what we were calling the next steps because I think they weren't actually the next steps. They weren't the things that men were looking to do next. And the kinds of environments that we were creating were things that we thought would work and had seen work, but weren't really geared towards the way that most men worked. So that was part of what kind of drove me to the place of saying we're missing something somewhere, right? Like the gears don't actually fit together, and we need to figure out why that is. Why did the gears not fit, or are we using the wrong kind of gear, or what is it? And that's part of what kind of came up, helped me come up with this tribe model, was to say, yeah, this would fit. This would fit with the annual men's retreat in the sense that it feels in some sense like what that retreat feels like. You're doing some of the same kinds of things. You're getting the same kind of action and activity, but you're also getting some of the same kind of spiritual transformation and formation that happens in a retreat setting. You're just doing it, in a different context. So that was kind of my goal and sort of my hope. And, I don't want to toot my horn too much without a whole lot of proven evidence, but I have seen this, accomplish some things in guys' lives that I think has been pretty unique when it comes to men's group experiences. So it's pretty cool.
That is great. So in order to, have a manhood tribe, so let's talk about the process, and then let's talk about the content that is available to somebody who, if starting a men's group was easy, everybody would do it.
Yeah.
And so what kind of tools, let's talk about the process, number one, and then let's talk about the tools that help somebody develop their tribe.
Yeah, absolutely. So the process that I use, this coaching program that I've talked about called Build Your Own Tribe, it's like a 12-week program. And so when you sign up, I would work with you to kind of figure out where you're trying to start from. Are you a guy who has led men's groups in the past, or has one currently and already has a group of guys in mind, and you're wanting to kind of take them through this experience and you're ready to go? Let's hop in and do it. Are you the kind of guy who has no friends, but, has heard of this tribe thing and thinks it's totally awesome and wants to try to make it happen? That's great. I would love to help you do that. But we got some groundwork that we got to lay before we can get into the 12-week program of how do you actually do that with a group of guys. So we would spend a little kind of time working on that, helping you identify where are you going to recruit some guys from? Is that through your church? Is that through your gym? Is that, how's that going to happen? And start to kind of put those pieces together and then say, okay, now let's jump into what does it look like to actually build one of these things? And so then when we do that, we just go through kind of a weekly coaching process. I do it in what I call cohorts. So it's just, a group of guys who are all kind of leading their own tribe, or going to be leading their own tribe. So I'm kind of coaching you along the process and teaching you, it will take you about 12 weeks to get your tribe off the ground. And so I'm going to walk you through what those 12 weeks look like. I'm going to teach you how to do those things. I'm going to provide you with all the content for it. I've got video lessons for you to use for it. Like all of that stuff is created for you. So you're not having to come up with content. You're not having to come up with guidelines or, any of that. It's all done. I'm just kind of showing you how to do it. But all of it is built around those kind of three pillars that I talked about earlier, which are manhood, camaraderie, and freedom. And so the 12 weeks kind of breaks up roughly evenly into thirds, where we focus on each one of those things. So the first part is really kind of built around manhood, which kind of devotes to, I mentioned earlier, just the 5 marks of manhood that we use. Those are the things that we kind of talk about. Here's what it means to be a man. And I think this is really important, especially in church context. And this is one of the things that I probably harp on more than just about anything. I think one of the things that churches have missed a little bit in the conversation about men, especially as it's going on right now, is that churches tend to work really hard at trying to explain to a man what it means to be a good or a biblical man. Now, that's a good thing to do. We certainly need to talk about that. There's no reason not to talk about that. But I think most men are at a place in our culture right now where they're asking more of the question, what does it mean to just simply be a man? Right. We've got so much confusion around that idea, and the church really isn't doing a lot to just try to answer that question, that we're kind of getting the cart before the horse. So I try to sort of back it up a little bit and say, let's talk about what it means to be a man and how can we get good at being a man. And so that's where those 5 marks of manhood come into play. The 5 marks of manhood are, I would call them morally neutral. Any man who exhibits those traits, and I'll just run through them real fast, is strength, courage, skill, honor, and allegiance. Any man who's living out those things is exhibiting what it means to be a man. Now, there's ways to do those things that are good. There's ways to do those things that are bad. To be a biblical man means you're going to be living out those things in certain ways that look like the life of Jesus. But those things are what it means to be a man. And so we kind of talk about all of that, what that looks like. And then later on, that's kind of how we begin to build our manhood challenges, is really around those things. So manhood is kind of like the first third of it. The second third goes into camaraderie, which is really just about building shared experience and trust. This is where we spend a lot of effort on telling stories. So we talk with each other about kind of the stories of our lives and what has shaped us into the man that we have, the men that we've become today. In the tribe model, we call it getting naked. So that's our way of just saying, hey, you are going to just strip down. You're going to let guys see the good, the bad, and the ugly of who you are, and what has kind of brought you to the place that you're at today. And then we're going to put that to rest, because that's kind of some heavy duty work, and it's necessary for building trust. But it also can get exhausting, and need a little break. So we follow that up with just some adventure. We need an opportunity to do some shared experience, to create some fun and some lasting memories. So we build some adventure into kind of the startup phase of your tribe.
Nice.
So all that kind of makes up like the middle third. And then the last third, which is probably my favorite part, is devoted to freedom. And this is where we just really say, what are the challenges and the obstacles in your life as a man that are in the way of you being the man that God has created you to be? What's really holding you back, keeping you from being able to be that man? Those are the places in your life where you are lacking freedom. And Jesus is the one who can actually bring that freedom to you so that you can become the man he's designed you to be. But getting there can be a difficult task or a difficult process, and it's one that I think most men are unfamiliar with. So the last third of our kind of our intro phase is really about what does it look like to pursue that kind of freedom. And we talk about freedom from addiction. We talk about freedom from lies. We talk about all kinds of ways that this needs to show up in our lives as men. But we use a process that really kind of focuses on one thing in particular that I have found super helpful. And it is I say it's the cure for the way that men tend to interact with each other when it comes to finding the problems in our lives. When men get confronted with problems, we all tend to try to do the same thing just by default, which is that we want to fix it. We come up against a problem in somebody else's life and we want to fix it. Our wives hate this about us,
right?
But it's just kind of the way that we're wired. And in small circumstances, being a fixer, being a problem solver is not a bad thing. That's a good thing. But if a man could fix the problems, the major challenges in his life that are holding him back and that are really causing him pain points, he would have done it already. So he's not coming to the tribe looking for quick fixes. He's not looking for advice chiefly. So we say, all right, we've got to learn to restrain ourselves from just offering that. And so we have to learn, what are we going to offer instead? And so what we do as a part of a tribe is we learn to practice the spiritual discipline of listening. So we just spend a lot of time actually in listening prayer, where as a group, we learn to listen for the voice of God and how to be able to test that voice or the things that we think we're hearing against scripture, against the history of the church. Again, how do we help kind of discern, is this really the voice of the Lord? But to do that in ways where as a community, we can begin to offer to another man, what is it that God is doing in your life? Where is he at work? And what kind of freedom does he want to bring to you? And how is he going to do that? And so this is really where the transformation element really begins to come into place, is that guys experience God working in their lives in a way that brings real freedom and lasting transformation in ways that they probably have never experienced before. And they're doing it in the context of a group of men that they really trust and come to love. And it's life-changing. I mean, there's not a better way to say it. It really does change men in ways that I have found rare, but really exciting.
That is awesome. So the initial contact is somebody reaches out to you, and then you set up a coaching call with them. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay.
Yep.
Is there a cost that you want to advertise, or is it online?
I can say typically for the 12 weeks, it's $1,000, per guy who's going through the program. There's, I'll say exceptions to that and alternatives to that. There's things there that we can talk about, but that's the kind of general price.
Yeah. And if you don't want to talk about it, I mean, that's totally up to you. We can, delete it or leave it on there. It's totally
that's
up
okay.
to you.
Okay. So a guy comes to me and is trying to figure out if that's the right next step for him. Often those guys have been introduced to Manhood Tribes content in some way, shape, or form before they're, making that call. They may have, I've got a freebie quiz that's a place where a lot of guys start that's just called How Manly Are You?
Right.
And that's an easy download that helps expose you to some of our 5 marks of manhood content, helps you get some resources around what are the places where you're doing well as a man? What are some places that you could do better? And that's an easy place to start. Some guys, I wrote a book this past year called How to Be a Man. And a lot of guys find Manhood Tribes through that. So there's different kind of entry points, but usually by the time that a guy is making an appointment with me, they've got a little bit of an idea of what Manhood Tribes is all about. And they're kind of looking to say, what would it take for me to start that up in my life?
Okay. So you take a guy to become a Manhood Tribe leader over a 12-week period. And let's say at the end of that 12-week, he starts his group. Then what from there? Yeah.
So at that point, it can kind of go one of two ways. He could be starting up the group while we're going through the coaching program. So some guys do that where, they've got their group ready to grow. They may already be leading a group and they've just decided, hey, this is the next thing that we're going to try as a group, is we're going to pursue this Manhood Tribes thing. And this may be all we do for the rest of our time together as a group, but we're going to give it a shot. And if that's the case, then, they can implement the coaching material right as they're going through it. Right. So the 12 weeks with me is the same as the 12 weeks that they're doing it with their group. Otherwise, a guy takes the material that he learns in the coaching program, implements it when he's got his group in place. And by the end of the program, you learn what to be able to do to keep your group going. So one of the things about a Manhood Tribe is that it is not curriculum dependent. We don't build it around curriculum. You're never looking for another book to study. You're not, trying to find the next video series to be able to use. You don't have to be a teacher or a guru to be able to keep your group going. We teach you a method, and you basically follow the method. And you will be able to follow that method pretty much indefinitely for the run of your group, however long you want to stay together. And there's always ways to, kind of add some variety or to mix things up a little bit if you want to. But that method, we call it chisel and challenge. So chisel is the method that we use for kind of that listening process, that sort of formational and transformational process. So we do that for 3 weeks at a time. And then 1 week out of the month, we do what I talked about earlier, the Manhood Challenge night. So 3 weeks of chisel, 1 week of challenge. And you'll pretty much do that for the life of your group and never run out of things to talk about. You'll more than likely have more things than you can get to. But it's great. It creates a rhythm that men can follow. They know what to expect. you take turns during the chisel weeks. We focus on one guy at a time. So you might get chiseled this month, and then it might be 2 or 3 months before you get chiseled again. And so there's always things that come up to be able to talk about and to figure out where God is at work in your life. So it's a really fun process, and it becomes easy. I won't say easy. It becomes very doable for a man to lead this. Leading, like you said earlier, leading a group is never easy. Is not the right word.
Right.
But you're not having to struggle with the challenges of what are we going to do next? What content am I going to come up with for our group? We just wanted to take that element out of it, and this method allows a man to be able to do that.
That's great. That's great. Man, you gave me a lot of good stuff to just think about, because like I was telling you, my leaning is toward scripture, and sometimes you just need a break from that and just talk about life. And so that's
I would say too, I think those things are meant to complement each other. We tell our guys in our tribes,
Totally.
like, you need a place where you're being regularly exposed to the stories and the truths of Scripture. Understanding the Scriptures is a very important part of being able to listen to God. If you don't know the Word of God from the Scriptures, it's hard to discern the Word of God from His voice, right? It's just hard to make sure, am I actually hearing from Him, or is this voice from my own head or some other place that's not good to listen to? Like, we're told to test the spirits, and so it is really important that we do know the Scriptures. I think it's helpful to have multiple ways of being able to grow in that relationship with Jesus and to connect to Him. And the Scriptures are, a beautiful and important and significant way of being able to do that. We try to teach men another way of being able to do that, a way that kind of complements that and goes alongside of it, but also brings transformation to men in a way that I think is really authentic to the masculine experience.
That's great. That is great. So, how would somebody find you? Like, let's say they haven't read your book or they haven't heard about Manhood Tribe, but now they're listening to this podcast. What's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
Yeah, the easiest place to get started is actually with that quiz that I mentioned. It's called How Manly Are You? And you can just go to howmanlyareYou.com and download the quiz right there. And so that will give you some Manhood Tribes content to kind of just get started with. That will also kind of get you exposed to all the things that Manhood Tribes is doing. We'll send you some emails, shoot you some links to YouTube videos and things like that. You can always unsubscribe if that's not something you want to stay a part of. But that's the easiest way to get connected. And over time, that'll also kind of expose you to, come check out the Build Your Own Tribe program and see if that's something you want to pursue. But I've got a website, manhoodtribes.com, YouTube channel, all that kind of stuff. So all of that's out there. Just looking for Manhood Tribes, you can find it. But howmanlyareYou.com, that's probably the easiest place to get started.
And I just typed that in real quick, and there's a lot of How Manly Are You quizzes all of a sudden.
Goodness. Okay. I need to check on that then. But mine's the .com one. So yeah.
Okay. Have you ever seen the How Stuff Works videos?
I have. Yeah, those are great.
They've got one.
Okay. Oh, interesting. Huh. Yeah, I didn't know that.
I love those videos too. I was just sitting here like when you were saying that, and this is cool. Okay, cool. I'll check that out. That is good. So tell me a little bit about your book. How did that come about?
Yeah, I have. It has been a bucket list dream of mine for a long time to be a writer. And I actually started out probably a decade ago writing fiction. I'm a huge like Lord of the Rings, Chronicles of Narnia fan, and I started writing fantasy fiction. I still would like to come back to that at some point in time. I've got a book that's completed sitting on the shelf that I wasn't able to get published. So I'm going to circle back around to it. But what I decided to do was to try the nonfiction route and see what I could learn about that. With my digital marketing background, I wanted to try kind of the self-publishing road and just see how that goes. So I did all of that this past year. I used a lot of the content that I already had for Manhood Tribes. Some of it was written, some of it was video. And so I just started putting it into kind of a book format, wrote some additional content for that as well. And How to Be a Man is awesome. Kind of the summary of a lot of what we've talked about today. And puts kind of the tribe model into a little more of a storytelling format. I tell a lot of my story. I use a lot of kind of Jesus style parables as a way to teach about manhood. and try to weave in some manhood challenges as well. So every chapter has a mark of manhood challenge at the end of it for guys to be able to have something to do. But most importantly about this book is that it's short. I wanted it to be something that guys would actually read. So it's only like 100 pages long. You can knock it out in a couple hours, or put it on the back of your toilet. You can, read a chapter every day for a week or two and be done with it.
That's funny. So I've got this book right here is in my background here. That's my first book that I wrote. I always call it a 2-seater. Put it on the back of the toilet and you can read it a couple of seats.
Absolutely right. So I think I've gotten more positive feedback over the book being short than I have about anything about it. So
mine's only 150 pages. I wrote it like I'd want to read it.
Yeah, exactly. So, that was really kind of the impetus, was to be able to say, I want to put this into a format that I can get into the hands of men. So a little different than what I was doing with my YouTube channel, but wanted guys to be able to have something that they could read, that they could share with other guys. And I'm really proud of it. I think it's a fantastic book. And it tells a lot more about what we've talked about today and kind of what a tribe looks like and 5 marks of manhood and going into more depth about all that kind of stuff. So it's a good read.
That's great. And so you also have a podcast and a YouTube channel. So tell us a little bit about that as well.
Yeah. So, at Manhood Tribes, pretty much wherever you're looking for stuff, you can find it there. But I try to, I do a mix of, first person, just kind of me talking to the camera, and interviews as well. And I try to create general content for men, mostly Christian men, but it's kind of broadly men. I tend to do it in what I would call series. So like right now, the content that's up is about men and work. It's just kind of like all the ways, different angles to be able to explore a man's relationship with his work, with his career, the way that he thinks about all of that kind of stuff. I'll spend several weeks just kind of going over, what does it look like for a man to engage with that kind of particular aspect of his life. So I just have a good time doing that, of creating content that I think is relevant and helpful for men kind of wherever they are in life, but helps draw them into this kind of a community where they've got other men that are pushing them and challenging them in those areas as well.
That is awesome. Well, Don, man, it's been a pleasure talking with you. I love your heart. I love what you've got going on here. I've been doing this for a long time, so if you ever have any questions,
absolutely, man,
of what not to do, don't hesitate to. I've done all the worst things you could possibly do in men's ministry. So, but we've been blessed by God, and He continues to help us reach more and more men. And our goal this year is pretty big. We got a pretty big goal. We've got a new app coming out, so we're really excited about it. And it's going to be kind of that. It's a community-based app, but it's really geared toward, we gamified it, so to speak. And so we've got, challenges in there and prayer walls and, discipleship material. You get points, and then there'll be a catalog that you can buy some of our merch off of it with the points and stuff like that. So we're really excited about that. Got big lofty goals, and like you said, we try to as much as we possibly can to reach that digital market that, is being overtaken by the enemy. It just seems like every little step. So whatever we can do to catch back just some of it, we want to pray for you to do that as well. So
thank you, man.
Good luck on all the stuff that you got going on. I pray that, and there are hundreds of thousands of manhood tribes all around the United States, and that they rub shoulder to shoulder with Man Up God's Way as well.
That would be awesome. Yeah. Praise God. That would be amazing.
Well, awesome, man. Well, God bless you, man. Have a great night. Folks, if you get an opportunity again, make sure you share this with as many people as you possibly can so we can reach more and more people for the sake of the gospel. Love you guys, and have a great night.
You've been listening to the Man Up God's Way podcast. Visit us on Facebook, Spotify, Apple, iTunes, and our website at manupgodsway.org.